Fear is the path to the dark side.
Lie. Ron Paul says it's on its last legs. Even Mitt Romney warns of its looming bankruptcy. At least the Republicans are united on the troubles facing Social Security. Where they differ is what to do about this massive social program that is actually, in some respects, worse than a Ponzi scheme. Here to discuss is George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams. Professor Williams, it's always a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Is Social Security worse than a Ponzi scheme? And if so, how so?
Well, I would say, first, a Ponzi scheme, the original Ponzi scheme by Charles Ponzi, that was voluntary. You didn't go to jail if you did not play the game. The same thing with Bernie Maddox. It was voluntary. But the Social Security, if you don't get into the government Ponzi scheme, you will go to jail. And I think that points out something offensive about Social Security in general. That is, here's somebody in Washington telling you and me how much we should put aside out of each week's pay for retirement. What if they told us how much we should put out of each week's pay for entertainment, for our children's education, for our food, for our housing? We would view it as tyranny. And what's the difference between that and Social Security? But even more importantly, Social Security is a lie. If you look at the pamphlet in 1939,
right,
it said the most we will ever pay, Congress said the most we will ever pay into Social Security is 3 cents on the first $3,000 worth of earnings. They also said that the government puts our Social Security money into an account and it is ours by a right. Now, there have been 2 Supreme Court cases saying there is no right to Social Security.
Not only have there been
anything they want with it.
Not only have there been the Supreme Court cases which basically say this isn't your money and you don't have a contractual right to it, but the money that the government once held, it has since robbed and spent. If you or I were holding money in trust for someone and we spent it on our own devices, we'd be exposed to a criminal prosecution. But not the government. It gets to break its own laws.
That's absolutely right. Now, nobody is suggesting to taking checks away from those people on retirement who are depending on Social Security. But what we ought to do, we ought to recognize that our young people should not be obligated to take care of these people. Somebody owes them money, but it's not the young people. And so what I've suggested in a column some time ago, that the government owns hundreds of millions of acres of land.
Right.
And I think that I would be able to tell the government, if you give me 50 acres of that land, you can forget about any Social Security obligation you have to me.
I don't see the government doing it, but it's a great suggestion. Even worse, if a young person puts $1 in today, when a young person puts $1 in today, how much of that dollar can they expect to get back when they're 65 from whatever the government is like in that day?
Well, I doubt whether it would be over 50 cents, if that. The Social Security system has to collapse. According to conservative estimates by the Social Security Administration, that in the 2030s, the Social Security tax alone will have to be close to 30% in order to pay today's obligations. And you ask yourself, in the 2030s, will those young people in the labor market be willing to tax themselves 30% to take care of some old geezers?
Wow.
I say no, they won't. And so the system is going to collapse.
So, Professor Williams, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.